Randy Fichtner is out as offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. Matt Canada will take over. Let's talk about what went wrong for Randy Fichtner and how Matt Canada can solve some of those problems. All right, Steeler fans, they got your letters. Randy Fichtner will not return as offensive coordinator for a fourth season. Instead, Matt Canada will be promoted to the offensive coordinator position. He was the quarterback coach a year ago. Let's talk today about what went wrong for Randy Fichtner. Why did this offense fall off from where it was a couple seasons back to where it is today, which was really a stagnant offense at the end of the season that just could not get started in games, could not run the football, and certainly could not convert in short yardage. Let's start with that running game, because I think this is where it's easy to point to and just say, look, this thing fell off a cliff. You look at where they started in 2018 when Fichtner took over, they weren't a terrible running team. Look, Randy Fichtner not dealt the best hand when it came to the 2018 season and that rushing attack, because remember, 2018 is the year that Le'Veon Bell decides, I'm not going to play football this season, right? He couldn't come to a contract negotiation with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and so he decided, hey, I'm going to sit out the entirety of this season, and that meant that Fichtner and that offense had to go to James Conner as their running back. James Conner at the time, we know now, as could be a starter caliber runner in this league, but at the time, remember, he was a third-round pick who was supposed to be a nice compliment to Le'Veon, but he only had a handful of carries the year prior, and he was coming off of a knee injury going into that 2018 season. There were a ton of question marks about whether or not James Conner could be a starting running back in this league, and he answered all those questions, and I thought he was very good in that season. In fact, from Football Outsiders and their DVOA, the Steelers were the 12th best rushing team in the NFL in the 2018 season. And that's not bad, right? I mean, it's not where they were with Le'Veon and Todd Haley in that offense, but you're going to have a fall off from Le'Veon Bell to James Conner, no doubt about it. The Steelers were 6th in 2017. They fell off to 12th in 2018. They fell off, but again, we're not talking about, the 30th best rushing attack in the league, which is exactly where this team was in 2019 and 2020. I think that was a real problem for this team. Obviously you can point to the idea that Ben Roethlisberger was not there in 2019, and that was why, the entire offense fell off. But Ben Roethlisberger was back in 2020, and the rushing game got no better. In fact, it remained 30th. 30th in rushing DVOA in 2019, 30th in rushing DVOA in 2020. So we went from 6th in 2017 with Le'Veon Bell. Then Randy Fichtner takes over in 2018, and they go to 12th, still good with James Conner, but 30th in 2019 and 30th in 2020, unacceptable. Unacceptable to have that bad a rushing attack. Again, we're talking about being down there with the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins and the Houston Texans, right, as some of these worst rushing teams over the past 2 seasons. Awful, awful stuff from the running game. I think one thing you can point to with the running game and why it fell off is Mike Munchak. And the loss of Mike Munchak 2 years ago has had a huge impact on this rushing attack. Look, Mike Munchak was not just the offensive line coach. I think we've certainly, since Munchak left, seen a degradation in the play of the offensive line as well. But he was also the offensive, or the run game coordinator, I should say. So you lose your run game coordinator, now it goes to Randy Fichtner to take over there, and well, the results speak for themselves. 12th when Mike Munchak was there, 30th when Randy Fichtner is now is both your offensive coordinator and your run game coordinator. Again, this is just unacceptable numbers. And I know that there are people that will say, look, the running game wasn't actually that good in 2018. In fact, here's a tweet from Ray Fittipaldo, who points to the idea that, hey, Munchak leaving had really nothing to do with the running game. It was all personnel based. And I will push back hard on this, because I like Ray Fittipaldo. I like the work that he does for the Post-Gazette. And he's not the only one that's in this. So I don't want this to come off as me attacking Ray. I'm not attacking Ray. I'm attacking the idea that Mike Munchak leaving had nothing to do with the running game going from where it was in 2018 to where it is now. Because Ray is pointing out here that the Steelers were 30th in total rushing in 2018. And that is true. But this is also why you'll never hear me use total yards to judge a running game or a passing game or an offense or a defense. I think total yards, an accumulation of yards, tells you nothing about how effective or efficient they were in getting those yards. And it removes all context for when those yards occurred. The Steelers were 30th in total rushing in 2018. That much is true. But the context that Ray leaves out of that tweet is that the Steelers were 31st in rushing attempts. They didn't run the ball in 2018. And so it's hard to be in the top of the league when it comes to rushing yards when you don't rush the ball. And that's the context that is removed from total rushing, but that's why I use DVOA. That's why I like Football Outsiders and the work that they do, because I think DVOA gives you all of that kind of context in there, not just yards per carry, but also things like, is 3 yards more valuable on 1st and 10, or is it more valuable on, let's say, 3rd and 2? I think we can all agree that getting 3 yards per carry is not good, but getting 3 yards per carry on 3rd and 2 is excellent. And that's the kind of work that Football Outsiders is doing in their rushing DVOA. And so when we go back to the DVOA numbers, and you see that the Steelers were 12th in DVOA in 2018, but they were 31st in rushing attempts that season, well, that's not damning on Mike Munchak. That's not damning on the running game. That's damning on Randy Fichtner and his play calling. You had one of the more effective, an above average rushing attack in 2018, but you chose not to run the football. That's a Randy Fichtner problem, not a Mike Munchak problem, not a personnel problem, not a Le'Veon Bell problem, not a James Conner problem. That's a Randy Fichtner problem. And it's something that's gotten worse over time because the Steelers don't run the football and they're also not very good at it. And where the Steelers were even worse, not just running the football, but just converting in general, was on 3rd and 4th down with 2 or less yards to go. Here's the conversion rate for them. 51% conversion rate in those situations. Just need a yard or 2 on 3rd and 4th down. Can't get it. In fact, it's a coin flip for them. Far worse than even the New York Jets were in that situation. And you look at some of the situational play calls at times from Fichtner, the 4th and 2 against Washington that started the losing streak, a back shoulder throw to Anthony McFarland, mind-boggling at the time. But then you look at that final game of the year, the loss to the Browns, when he ran not just the same play with Derek Watt on the fullback dive, but the same play from the same formation with the same motion. Alex Kazor did a great breakdown of this. I'll link to it in the description of this video. I mean, again, the Browns saw it coming the second time easily because they had seen that play, literally had seen that exact play just a few drives before. And it ultimately led to the idea that late in the game, in that same game, when, look, the Steelers should have been out of it in the first quarter, and they pretty much were, but it kind of was a game in the fourth quarter. They were down by 12 driving. And they don't even want to try and convert on 4th and 1. They would rather punt on 4th and 1 than even try to convert. And when you look at the numbers, I can't even tell you that the decision was wrong. Because look at these numbers. 51% conversion rate in that situation. It was a coin flip for Mike Tomlin. And again, this is something that cannot happen. As Tomlin said, if you can't get a single yard, you don't deserve to win football games. And the sad reality for the Steelers was they were the worst at getting 1 single yard. They were the worst in the league at getting even a single yard. The next thing I want to touch on is the slow starts the Steelers have gotten out to offensively over the past 3 years. And this was something that was complained about in Todd Haley, at the end of Todd Haley's tenure as offensive coordinator. That offense also, the first 15 plays were just, it was always 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out in those situations. And that certainly was the case at the end of Haley's tenure. But under Fichtner, it's not gotten better. Like a lot of things, it's gotten worse offensively. The Steelers in 2020 scored just 4 offensive touchdowns in the first quarter, just one of them coming on the opening drive. You compare that, just 4 touchdowns in the first quarter of this season, to where Todd Haley left off when that offense scored 8 touchdowns in the first quarter. It is markedly worse. In fact, in 2020, the Steelers were the worst team. Would you be surprised to know the Steelers were the worst in the first quarter at scoring offensive touchdowns? The worst offense in the league in the first quarter. Again, it's one of those things that's so disappointing, not just because of the fact that they've regressed from where they left off, right? And that Fichtner and Ben were supposed to have this connection, and this was supposed to be something totally different from what we saw under, Haley. But the fact that this team now all of a sudden has a great defense, and the fact that this defense could play so well if playing with a lead, and the fact they've gotten after the quarterback so well and turned the ball over so well for the past years. And boy, what would this defense be able to do with an offense that could start hot and get out to 7, 10, 14-point leads early in football games? We never saw that. In fact, the last time we saw this team score an offensive touchdown in the 2020 season, it was against the Cincinnati Bengals. The first time they played. That's the last time this offense scored a touchdown in the first quarter. Unacceptable play, especially considering how good this defense was. The fact that they averaged just 2 points in the first quarter for the season, 42 first quarter points for this team overall. It's awful. And for a team with such a good defense, an unacceptable start for this offense. All right, then the last thing I want to touch on is the no huddle offense. We talked about everything that Fichtner's offense was bad at, right? The running game, the short yardage, the first quarter slow starts, right? Everything that he did poorly as an offensive coordinator. There was one thing they were legitimately great at in 2020, and that's the no huddle. They were the best in football in 2020 out of no huddle. The success rate that they had out of no huddle, 65%, best in the NFL. And I'll put the definition for success rate down here. But again, the Steelers were the best team in football out of no huddle. And you compare that to their standard offense, right, the regular offense, 45% success rate, one of the worst in the league. And the biggest difference between no huddle and their standard offense was the Pittsburgh Steelers. 20% difference in success rate when it came to no huddle versus your standard offense. Now, we also heard a lot this year about Ben Roethlisberger, the criticism of Ben. He can't throw deep, the arm is dead, all of that. All he does is dink and dunk, everything's short passing. And that was true for the majority of the year, right? Ben Roethlisberger was not a deep thrower. He was not effective throwing down the field. But what was interesting about when you look at these numbers again, when you break them down versus by no huddle and huddle or whatever standard offense, Ben was 29th in yards per attempt this year, 6.3, lowest of his career. Out of no huddle, though, 8.4 yards per attempt. That would have been second in the National Football League. If he had done 8.4 this year for the year, that would have been second in the National Football League. So out of no huddle, he's a far more effective quarterback because when he's huddling up, when they're in the standard offense, 5.9 yards per attempt, leaving him again with a career or with a year that's averages out to 6.3. And look, we can draw comparisons to like Ben calling the plays, right? The real problem here at a no huddle is that Ben gets to call the plays versus Fichtner gets to call the plays. And Ben, certainly made a big deal out of that when he, after the Ravens game, said that he was drawing it up in the dirt. Okay? I don't really care about that stuff, right? I mean, look, yes, you can point to the second half of Baltimore, the second half of Indianapolis, where the offense was far more effective, and Ben Roethlisberger, I think, largely was calling the plays in those moments. But I don't really care about that stuff, right? Whether Ben's a better play caller than Randy Fichtner, don't care. Here's what I care about. The Steeler offense was far more effective out of no huddle. We know that, right? The numbers bear that out. But we also have this period for the Steeler season, weeks 12 through 16, and even the wild card round, where the offense was terrible, especially in the first quarter of games. We touched on that already, right? The fact that this offense just could not put together drives, could not put up points early in football games. So did they try more no huddle in that case? Again, given that we've established this team is the best in the league in no huddle, did they at least try no huddle in those moments, to try it earlier on in a football game? No, they did not. For the Steelers season, they ran about 11 plays out of no huddle, which I'll give credit to Fichtner for, by the way. That's a top 10 in the league. Right? They were one of the teams that ran the most no huddle in the league. But early in games, they did not. Weeks 12 through 16, and then you also include the wild card game in this, the Steelers in the first quarter ran just 7% of their plays. Just 6 plays total. 6 plays total in 6 weeks of football out of no huddle. That's it. 6 plays out of no huddle. Again, we've established one of the worst teams in the league when they huddle up, one of the best team in the league when they don't. Did Randy Fichtner know that? Here's my question. I don't care who called the plays. I don't care if Ben's a better offensive. I don't care about that stuff, right? Ben should be calling the plays. Who cares? Did Randy Fichtner know that this offense was the best in the league at no huddle? And if he did know that, right? If there was enough self-scouting in that offense, within his offense, to know that they were the best offense in the league in no huddle, and you have an offense that's struggling so much early in games to score, why would you only run 6 plays out of no huddle in the first quarter? Why? I don't know the answer to that question, because I think the answer to that question is that they did not know that they were the best team in the league out of no huddle. I think they did not know that, and that's why they didn't even try it. And this, I think, is the lesson of the Randy Fichtner offense. You go back to 2018, when we heard that they were the worst in the league in rushing in 2018. No. They were actually pretty effective. They were above average in rushing. They chose not to run the football. You fast forward now to 2020. We talk about how ineffective this team was on offense in the first quarter, early in games, right? No, they chose not to do no huddle. They chose not to do it. And so when I look at Matt Canada and what I hope to see from a Matt Canada offense, there's one thing he needs to improve. It's self-scouting, right? Obviously, he's got a lot of work to do on the offensive line, the running game, all of that. But he has to be better at self-scouting, better at understanding his tendencies, the tendencies of defenses that he's playing. Understand what you're good at and emphasize those things. Understand what your players are good at. Emphasize those things. Fichtner didn't fail because he gave Ben too much power, or that Ben was the real offensive coordinator, and those things may be true. But Fichtner failed because he had an inability to diagnose what was wrong with the offense and therefore had no idea on how to fix it. I have a lot of optimism for the future of Matt Canada. I'm certainly going to do a video all about Canada and what we can expect from his offense in the coming days. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for more Steeler Country.